The fluorescent lights hummed their monotonous song above my hospital bed, casting everything in that particular shade of sterile white that makes you forget what natural sunlight looks like. I'd been staring at the ceiling tiles for what felt like hours, counting the small perforations in each square, trying to distract myself from the persistent ache in my abdomen where they'd removed my appendix 3 days earlier. The surgery had been emergency. One moment I was doubled over in the grocery store parking lot. The next I was being wheeled into an operating room with a nurse holding my hand, telling me to count backward from 10. I'd made it to 7 before the world dissolved into chemical darkness. When I woke up, groggy and disoriented, I'd expected to see David's face. My husband of 12 years, the man who'd promised to be there in sickness and in health. But the chair beside my bed had been empty. A nurse with kind eyes had explained that he'd stepped out to make some phone calls, that he'd be back soon. That was 3 days ago. He'd visited, of course. Brief appearances that felt more like obligation than care. He'd bring me magazines I didn't want to read and fruit cups from the hospital cafeteria that I couldn't eat because of the nausea. He'd sit in that chair, scrolling through his phone, asking the nurses questions about my recovery timeline with the detachment of someone inquiring about a car repair estimate. I'd told myself he was just stressed. David didn't handle medical emergencies well. He'd nearly fainted when I'd broken my wrist 5 years ago, turning green at the sight of the bone jutting out at an unnatural angle. Some people just aren't built for hospitals, I reasoned. Some people show their love in different ways. But there was something else in his eyes lately. Something distant and cold that I couldn't quite name. Whenever I tried to hold his hand, he'd find a reason to stand up, to adjust the blinds, to refill my water pitcher. When I asked him how things were at home, he'd give one-word answers. Fine. Good. Same. It was Thursday afternoon when he finally showed up with that look on his face. I knew immediately that something was wrong. Not wrong in the way of bad news about test results or complications from surgery, but wrong in a way that made my stomach clench with a dread that had nothing to do with my healing incision. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, not coming in, not leaving. Just standing there in his gray suit, the one I'd helped him pick out for his promotion 2 years ago, with his hands shoved deep in his pockets. His jaw was set in that particular way it got when he'd made up his mind about something and didn't want to be talked out of it. Hey, I said, trying to sound cheerful despite the morphine fog and the sudden racing of my heart. You're here early. I wasn't expecting you until after work. I left early, he said flatly, finally stepping into the room. He didn't sit down, didn't come close to the bed, just stood there near the door, maintaining a careful distance, as if what I had might be contagious. Is everything okay? I asked, though I already knew it wasn't. You don't live with someone for over a decade without learning to read the subtle shifts in their body language, the micro-expressions that telegraph thoughts they haven't yet spoken aloud. David took a deep breath, the kind people take before jumping into cold water or ripping off a bandage. His eyes fixed on something over my shoulder, the 4-pole, maybe, or the monitor tracking my vital signs. Anywhere but my face. We need to talk, he said. 4 words. 4 simple, terrible words that have preceded countless relationship endings since the beginning of time. My mouth went dry. The steady beep of the heart monitor seemed to get louder, more insistent. Okay, I whispered, even though nothing about this was okay. What about? He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, and for just a moment, I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt, maybe, or regret, but it was gone before I could be sure. When he finally met my eyes, his expression had hardened into something I didn't recognize. I can't do this anymore, Sarah. The words hung in the air between us like smoke. I blinked, trying to process them, trying to make them make sense in the context of my hospital room, my healing body, the 12 years we'd built together. Can't do what? I asked, though some part of me already knew. Some part of me had known for months, maybe, but had been too afraid to look directly at it. This. Us. He gestured vaguely between us, a dismissive wave of his hand that seemed to encompass everything, Our marriage, our history, the promises we'd made standing in front of everyone we loved. I'm not happy, Sarah. I haven't been happy for a long time. The room tilted. Or maybe it was just me, the morphine making everything feel unsteady and surreal. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not now. Not while I was lying in a hospital bed, weak and vulnerable and still wearing a gown that tied in the back. What are you saying? My voice sounded strange to my own ears, high and thin and frightened. David finally moved, but not toward me. He walked to the window, staring out at the parking lot 6 floors below. The afternoon sun caught the gray in his hair, when had so much gray appeared, and threw his profile into sharp relief. I'm saying I want a divorce. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually gasped, my hand flying to my chest as if I could somehow hold myself together. The heart monitor beeped faster, and I saw David glance at it, then quickly away. You're leaving me? I couldn't believe I was saying these words, asking this question. Right now. While I'm in the hospital. I'm not leaving you because you're in the hospital, he said, and I heard the defensiveness creeping into his voice. This has nothing to do with your surgery. I've been thinking about this for a long time. It seemed like the right time to tell you. The right time. I repeated incredulously, my voice rising despite the pain it caused my tender abdomen. You think this is the right time? I can barely walk to the bathroom by myself, David. They're keeping me here for at least 2 more days because of complications, and you think this is the right time to tell me you want to end our marriage? He turned from the window, and for the first time since he'd entered the room, he looked directly at me. Really looked at me. What I saw in his eyes made my blood run cold. There was no warmth there. No recognition of the woman he'd promised to love forever. I was a stranger to him. Or worse, an obligation he was finally shedding. There's never going to be a perfect time for this conversation, he said. And I'm sorry about your surgery, I really am. But my life can't be on hold indefinitely. I've made my decision. Your life on hold? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I had emergency surgery 3 days ago. 3 days. David. And you've been planning this? You've been sitting next to this bed, pretending to care, while actually you were just waiting for the right moment to blow up my entire world. That's not fair. Fair. I wanted to laugh, but I was afraid if I started, I might never stop. Or worse, I might start crying, and I refused to cry in front of this man who suddenly seemed like a stranger wearing my husband's face. You want to talk about what's fair? I know the timing is bad. The timing is bad? I cut him off, anger finally breaking through the shock. That's what you're going with? The timing is bad? I'm lying in a hospital bed, David. I'm in pain. I'm scared. And you're standing there telling me our marriage is over like you're canceling a dinner reservation. He had the decency to look uncomfortable, at least. He shifted his weight again, his hands still buried in his pockets, his shoulders hunched slightly forward. But he didn't take it back. Didn't say he'd made a mistake, that he'd been hasty, that fear and stress had made him speak rashly. Instead, he said something that made everything infinitely worse. There's someone else. The room went very still. Even the machines seemed to quiet, as if the entire universe was holding its breath, waiting to see how I would respond to this revelation. What? The word came out as barely more than a whisper. I didn't plan it, he said quickly, as if that made it better somehow. It just happened. Her name is Jessica. She works in the accounting department at the firm. We've been seeing each other for about 6 months. 6 months. 6 months he'd been lying to me. 6 months he'd been kissing me goodbye in the mornings and coming home to me at night, all while maintaining a secret relationship with someone else. 6 months of deception, of betrayal, of looking me in the eye and telling me he loved me while his heart belonged to someone else. I thought about the last 6 months, trying to pinpoint when things had changed. There had been more late nights at the office, yes. More business dinners. More times when he'd been distracted, distant, checking his phone with a small smile that he'd quickly hide when he noticed me watching. I'd thought it was work stress. The promotion he'd gotten had come with increased responsibilities, longer hours, more pressure. I'd been understanding, supportive. I'd taken on more of the household responsibilities, had stopped complaining when he missed dinner or came home after I'd already gone to bed. What a fool I'd been. 6 months, I said aloud, testing the words, feeling their weight. You've been cheating on me for 6 months. I didn't want to hurt you. Didn't want to hurt me? My voice cracked, and I hated how weak I sounded. You're standing in my hospital room telling me you've been having an affair, and you didn't want to hurt me? How the hell did you think this was going to go, David? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd seen 1,000 times. I know you're upset. Upset? Upset? I'm not upset about a missed anniversary or a forgotten birthday. You've destroyed our marriage. You've been lying to me for half a year. And you chose to tell me now, when I'm at my most vulnerable, when I literally cannot even leave this bed without help. My voice broke on the last word, and I pressed my lips together, determined not to cry. I'm sorry, he said, but the words were hollow. An automatic response, empty of real feeling. No, you're not. If you were sorry, you wouldn't have done it. If you were sorry, you wouldn't be standing there looking at me like I'm something you're eager to be done with. He didn't deny it. That might have been the worst part. He didn't even try to deny it. I've already talked to a lawyer, he said, and my heart stuttered in my chest. I've filed for divorce. The papers will be ready next week. Everything was moving too fast. My mind couldn't keep up. Just this morning, I'd been worrying about when I could return to work, about whether we needed to call a plumber for that dripping faucet in the guest bathroom. I'd been living in the same reality I'd inhabited for 12 years, where David was my husband and we were building a life together. Now that reality was shattering around me, piece by piece, and I couldn't seem to grab hold of any of the fragments. The house, I managed to say, though my thoughts were scattered, chaotic. We'll have to sell the house. David's expression shifted, just slightly, just enough for me to notice. And in that shift, I saw something that made my stomach drop. About that, he said slowly. I've already sold it. The world stopped spinning. Actually stopped, like someone had hit a pause button on reality itself. You what? I sold the house. The closing is in 3 weeks. I couldn't breathe. My lungs had forgotten how to work. The room spun around me, and I gripped the bed rails with white-knuckled hands, trying to anchor myself to something solid. That's my house, I whispered. That's our house. You can't just sell it without. It's in my name, he said, and there was something almost smug in his voice now, a note of satisfaction that made me want to scream. When we refinanced 5 years ago, remember? You weren't working at the time, so we put it solely in my name to get better rates. Legally, it's my house. I can sell it if I want to. I remembered. God, I remembered. I'd been recovering from my mother's death, taking time off work to handle her estate, to grieve. Money had been tight, and when David suggested refinancing to get a lower rate, I'd agreed without thinking twice. Why would I? He was my husband. We were partners. What was his was mine, and what was mine was his. Except apparently, that had been a lie. Apparently, he'd been planning his exit strategy even then, making sure he had all the power, all the control. Where am I supposed to go? My voice cracked completely now, tears finally spilling over despite my determination not to cry. When I get out of here, where am I supposed to go? He shrugged. Actually shrugged, as if this was a minor inconvenience rather than him making me homeless while I was still recovering from surgery. You'll figure something out. Maybe stay with your sister for a while. The sale doesn't close for 3 weeks, so you have time to find something. I have time, I repeated numbly. I have time? David, I can barely walk. I can't lift anything over 5 pounds for the next month. I'm supposed to be resting, recovering, and you're telling me I need to find a new place to live, pack up everything I own, and move out of the house we've lived in for 10 years. I'm sorry about the timing. Stop saying that. I screamed, not caring that my abdomen screamed in protest, not caring that the monitors were going crazy, not caring that a nurse would probably come running any second. Stop saying you're sorry about the timing, like that's the problem here. The problem isn't the timing, David. The problem is that you're a coward and a liar and you're abandoning me when I need you most. His face hardened. There it was, the real David, the one he'd been hiding behind that careful mask of concern and obligation. Cold, calculating, cruel. I'm not abandoning you. You're a grown woman, Sarah. You don't need me to survive. You've got a job, you've got friends, you've got your sister. You'll be fine. I'll be fine. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You don't get to decide that. You don't get to blow up my life and then tell me I'll be fine. What do you want me to say? He asked, and now he sounded irritated, as if I was being unreasonable. That I'll stay in a marriage I'm miserable in just because you had surgery? That I'll put my happiness on hold because the timing isn't convenient for you? I want you to act like the man I married. I shouted. I want you to remember that you promised to be there for me in sickness and in health. I want you to have the decency to wait until I can at least stand up without feeling like I'm going to pass out before you destroy everything. Those promises were made a long time ago, he said quietly. People change. Feelings change. I'm not the same person I was 12 years ago, and neither are you. So that's it? You're just going to walk away. I already have. The finality in those words was devastating. He'd already left me, emotionally if not physically. This conversation wasn't a discussion or a negotiation. It was a notification. He was informing me of decisions he'd already made, actions he'd already taken. My feelings, my needs, my life, none of it mattered to him anymore. Maybe it never had. The door opened, and a nurse appeared, her expression concerned. She looked at the monitors, then at me, then at David. Is everything all right in here? Your heart rate is elevated, she said, addressing me but keeping a wary eye on David. Everything's fine, David said smoothly, already moving toward the door. I was just leaving. Wait, I started, but he was already gone, striding out of the room without a backward glance, leaving me alone with the nurse and the wreckage of my life. Honey, what happened? The nurse asked gently, adjusting my four and checking my vitals. You're shaking. My husband, I managed to say through chattering teeth. Shock, I realized dimly. I was going into shock. He said he's leaving me. He sold our house. He's been having an affair. Her face softened with sympathy. Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. Let me get you something to help you calm down, okay? She hurried out, returning moments later with a small cup containing a pill. This will help with the anxiety. And I'm going to page Dr. Morrison. We need to make sure your blood pressure hasn't spiked too high. I took the pill obediently, swallowing it with shaking hands. The room felt surreal, like I was watching everything happen to someone else. This couldn't be my life. This couldn't be happening to me. But it was. It was happening, and I was powerless to stop it. Over the next few hours, I was prodded and examined and questioned. Dr. Morrison assured me that while my blood pressure was elevated, it wasn't dangerously so, and that stress was normal after surgery. She didn't know that the stress had nothing to do with the appendectomy and everything to do with the husband who just casually destroyed my life. By evening, I was alone again. Visiting hours were over, and the hospital had grown quiet except for the usual nighttime sounds, hushed voices at the nurse's station, the occasional beep of a monitor, wheels squeaking in the hallway. I stared at my phone, trying to decide who to call. My sister Emma was the obvious choice, but she was 8 months pregnant and dealing with her own stress. The last thing she needed was to deal with my crisis. My best friend, Rachel, was in Europe for her anniversary. My mother was dead. My father had remarried and moved to Florida, and we'd never been particularly close anyway. The truth was, for the past 12 years, David had been my person. He'd been the one I called when something went wrong, the one I shared my triumphs and failures with. I'd built my life around him, had made him the center of my universe, and now that center had collapsed, leaving me spinning in empty space. How had I let this happen? How had I become so dependent on one person that I couldn't even figure out who to call when that person betrayed me? I thought about the life we'd built together. The house we'd bought as newlyweds, young and optimistic, and so sure we'd grow old there together. The countless dinners we'd shared at that kitchen table, the lazy Sunday mornings in bed, the fights and the makeups and the comfortable silence that comes from really knowing someone. Or thinking you know them. How much of it had been real? How much had I been seeing what I wanted to see, believing what I wanted to believe, ignoring all the signs that something was wrong? I thought about Jessica, this woman I'd never met who'd been sleeping with my husband for the past 6 months. What did she look like? Was she younger than me, prettier? Did she make him laugh the way I used to? Did he touch her the way he used to touch me, back when he still seemed to want me? The jealousy and hurt were overwhelming, but beneath them was something else, anger. Pure, burning rage at the injustice of it all. He got to walk away, to start fresh with someone new, while I was left to pick up the pieces of the life he'd shattered. He got to be happy with Jessica while I recovered from surgery alone, homeless and heartbroken. It wasn't fair. But life rarely was. I must have fallen asleep at some point because I woke to soft morning light filtering through the blinds. My mouth was dry, my body ached, and for one blissful moment, I'd forgotten about yesterday. Then it all came rushing back. David's cold eyes, his casual cruelty, the way he destroyed everything and walked away without a backward glance. I pressed the call button, and a different nurse appeared, younger than the one from yesterday, with kind brown eyes and a gentle smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Hartley. How are we feeling today?" Mrs. Hartley. I was still Mrs. Hartley, at least for now. Soon I'd just be Sarah Mitchell again, the name I'd been born with, the identity I'd had before David. "I'm okay," I lied, because what else could I say? That my entire world had ended yesterday? That I was more broken than any surgery could fix? "Dr. Morrison wants to check your incision this morning, and if everything looks good, we might be able to discharge you later today or tomorrow." Discharge. Release me into the world, where I had nowhere to go and no one to take care of me. The idea was terrifying. "Actually," I said slowly, "could you tell Dr. Morrison that I'm not feeling well? That I think I need to stay a bit longer?" The nurse's expression shifted to concern. "What's wrong? Are you in pain?" Everything hurt, but not in any way she could treat with medication. "Just dizzy and nauseous. I don't think I'm ready to go home yet." She studied me for a long moment, and I wondered if she could see through the lie. But she just nodded slowly. "I'll let her know. She'll want to run some tests, just to be safe." "Thank you." After she left, I reached for my phone. I needed to call Emma. I needed to tell someone what had happened, needed to make it real by speaking it aloud. My fingers hovered over her contact information, but I couldn't quite bring myself to press the button. Once I told her, it would be real. Once I said the words, "David is leaving me, he's been having an affair, he sold our house," there would be no taking them back, no pretending it was just a bad dream. But I couldn't hide forever. I pressed the call button. Emma answered on the third ring, sounding out of breath. "Sarah, are you okay?" How are you feeling? I said, and my voice broke on her nickname. Just one syllable, and suddenly I was crying, great gasping sobs that hurt my tender abdomen, but I couldn't stop, couldn't hold back the tsunami of grief and betrayal and fear that had been building since yesterday afternoon. Sarah? Sarah, what's wrong? Is it the surgery? Are you okay? David left me. I managed to choke out between sobs. He came to the hospital yesterday and told me he wants a divorce. He's been having an affair. He sold our house. I don't know what to do, Em. I don't know what to do. Silence on the other end of the line, heavy with shock. Then, that bastard. That absolute bastard. He told you this while you were in the hospital. Yesterday. He just walked in and said he wasn't happy and there was someone else and the house was already sold and my voice dissolved into tears again. I'm coming there right now. No, Em, you're pregnant. You shouldn't be driving all that way. I don't care. You're my sister and you need me. I'll be there in an hour. She hung up before I could protest further, and I was left holding the phone, feeling slightly less alone than I had moments before. True to her word, Emma appeared exactly 57 minutes later, breathless and fierce, her pregnant belly preceding her through the door like the prow of a ship. She took one look at me, pale and hollow-eyed and broken, and her face crumpled. "Oh, sweetie," she said, rushing to my bedside as fast as her condition would allow. She gathered me into her arms, careful of my 4-line and surgical site, and I cried into her shoulder like I was a child again. "I'm sorry," I sobbed. "I know you have enough to deal with the baby coming and—" "Stop. Don't you dare apologize. You're my sister. There's nowhere else I'd rather be right now." She held me until the tears finally subsided, until I was left with just hollow emptiness and the occasional hiccup. Then she pulled back, her hands on my shoulders, and looked at me with such fierce determination that I almost smiled. "Okay, tell me everything." So I did. I told her about David's coldness over the past few days, about how he'd stood in the doorway yesterday looking at me like I was a stranger. I told her about Jessica from accounting, about the 6 months of lies, about the house being sold and me having nowhere to go. With every word, Emma's expression grew darker. By the time I finished, she looked ready to commit murder. "That absolute piece of garbage," she hissed. "He waited until you were at your most vulnerable. He planned this. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment thing. He planned it. The timing, the house sale, everything. He wanted you helpless so you couldn't fight back." I hadn't thought of it that way, but as soon as she said it, I knew she was right. David had orchestrated all of this carefully, had made sure he held all the cards before he revealed his hand. "What am I going to do?" I whispered. "First, you're going to get a lawyer. The best divorce attorney in the city. Just because the house is in his name doesn't mean he gets to keep everything. You've been married for 12 years. That counts for something. And the fact that he was having an affair? That's going to count for a lot. I don't have money for a lawyer. Don't worry about that. Mark and I will help. We'll figure it out. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm telling you. This is what family does." She squeezed my hand. "Second, you're not going to stay in that house for 3 weeks, wondering when he's going to show up. When you get discharged, you're coming to stay with us. Emma, you're about to have a baby. You don't need a houseguest right now. I need my sister close by, and you need somewhere safe to recover. It's not up for debate." I wanted to argue, to insist I could handle this on my own, but the truth was I couldn't. I was broken in ways that had nothing to do with my surgery, and I needed help. I needed my sister. "Thank you," I whispered. "That's what sisters are for." She stayed with me all day, leaving only when visiting hours ended. She'd already called Mark, her husband, who'd promised to go to the house and pack a bag for me. She'd called her lawyer friend to get a referral for a divorce attorney. She'd even called my boss to explain that I'd need more time off than originally anticipated. Emma had always been the organized one, the planner, the one who knew how to handle a crisis. I'd spent my life being the romantic, the dreamer, the one who believed in fairy tales and happy endings. Look where that had gotten me. That night, alone in my hospital room, I made myself face the truth. My marriage was over. The life I'd known was over. Everything I'd built with David, every plan we'd made, every dream we'd shared, it was all gone, destroyed by his selfishness and my naivety. But I was still here. Broken, yes. Betrayed and hurt and scared, yes. But alive. Still breathing. Still capable of standing up, even if it hurt like hell. David thought he'd crushed me. He thought he'd timed everything perfectly, that he'd catch me at my weakest and I'd simply fold. He didn't know, couldn't know, that sometimes the worst moments in life are also the ones that show you what you're truly made of. I wasn't going to fold. I wasn't going to disappear quietly or make this easy for him. He wanted a divorce? Fine. He'd get one. But on my terms, not his. I reached for my phone and composed a text to David, my fingers steady despite the rage coursing through my veins. You want a divorce? Fine. But we're going to do this the right way. I'm getting a lawyer, and you're not going to railroad me into accepting whatever scraps you decide to throw my way. You destroyed our marriage, but you don't get to destroy me too. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then turned off my phone and closed my eyes. Tomorrow, I would start picking up the pieces. Tomorrow, I would begin figuring out who I was without David, without the identity of wife I'd worn for so long it had become fused to my skin. Tomorrow, I would start fighting back. But tonight, I would let myself grieve. I would mourn the loss of the man I'd thought I married, the future I'd thought we'd have, the life I'd thought we were building. Tomorrow would be for anger and action. Tonight was for tears. The days blurred together after that. Dr. Morrison finally agreed to discharge me after 2 more days of observation that we both knew was more about giving me time to prepare mentally than any medical necessity. Emma picked me up, helped me into her car with the careful gentleness you'd use with something fragile and precious. Mark had packed 3 suitcases of my belongings, though he'd had to get creative since David had changed the locks on the house. I had to climb through the bedroom window, he admitted sheepishly as we drove to their place. Felt like a burglar breaking into your own house. David saw me and threatened to call the cops. I told him to go ahead, that I'd be happy to explain to the police why his wife couldn't get into her own home while she was recovering from surgery. What did he say? I asked. Nothing. Just stood there with his phone in his hand, looking like the coward he is. Then he went inside and slammed the door. I tried to imagine David's face during that confrontation, tried to feel satisfaction at his discomfort. But I felt nothing. Numbness had settled over me like a thick blanket, muffling all emotion. Emma and Mark's house was warm and welcoming, full of soft blankets and the smell of Mark's cooking. They'd set up the guest room for me, had stocked the bathroom with my favorite toiletries, had even framed a photo of Emma and me as children and placed it on the nightstand. I know it's not home, Emma said softly as she showed me the room. But we want you to feel comfortable here. Stay as long as you need. That night, lying in a bed that wasn't mine, in a house that wasn't mine, I finally let myself feel the full weight of what had happened. I'd lost everything. My husband, my home, my sense of identity, the future I'd been counting on. 12 years of my life had been erased in a single conversation. Who was I without David? Without the house we'd made into a home? Without the routines and rituals we'd built together? I didn't know. And that terrified me more than anything else. The next week was a blur of lawyer consultations and difficult conversations. Emma's friend had referred me to Patricia Winters, a divorce attorney with a reputation for being brilliant and ruthless. She was in her 50s, impeccably dressed, with sharp eyes that seemed to see right through any pretense. "Tell me everything," she said during our first meeting, pen poised over a yellow legal pad. So I did. Again. Every painful detail, every moment of betrayal. Patricia listened without interruption, taking notes, her expression neutral but her eyes growing harder with each revelation. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me directly. "Your husband is a piece of work," she said bluntly. "He's trying to rush this through before you have time to think clearly, before you understand what you're entitled to. The good news is that you have rights. 12 years of marriage means you're entitled to a significant portion of the marital assets, regardless of whose name they're in. The house sale complicates things, but we can fight it." "Can we stop it?" "Probably not at this stage, but we can make sure you get your fair share of the proceeds. And the affair, that's going to work in our favor. This state considers fault in divorce proceedings." His infidelity, combined with the timing of his revelation, paints a very clear picture of his character. For the first time since David's announcement, I felt a spark of something that might have been hope. Or maybe just vindictive satisfaction. "I want him to pay," I said quietly. "Not just financially. I want him to face consequences for what he did." Patricia smiled, and it wasn't a kind expression. "Then we're going to get along just fine." She filed the initial paperwork that same day, and David was served with papers 2 days later. He called me immediately, furious. "What the hell, Sarah? You hired Patricia Winters? She's going to make this ugly." "You made this ugly," I said, my voice cold. "You destroyed our marriage, David. You don't get to control how I respond to that. I thought we could be civilized about this. Handle it like adults. Adults don't abandon their spouses while they're in the hospital. Adults don't have affairs. Adults don't sell their house out from under their wife without consulting her. You wanted ugly? This is ugly. Get used to it." I hung up on him, my hands shaking but a grim smile on my face. It felt good to fight back. It felt good to not be a victim. The days turned into weeks. My body healed slowly, the surgical site closing, the pain fading to a dull ache. But the other wounds, the emotional ones, those seemed to grow deeper with each passing day. I'd started seeing a therapist, Dr. Chen, who specialized in trauma and grief. She had a gentle way of asking questions that made me confront things I'd been avoiding. "You've lost your sense of identity," she observed during our third session. "For 12 years, you defined yourself primarily as David's wife. Now that identity is gone, and you're struggling to figure out who you are without it.